Hello, welcome to High Stakes Testing plus Special Ed, How to Get a Positive Result. I'm Karen Bess and I work for Don Johnston in the Marketing Department. We're about to begin our webinar and the Common Core is here and many districts have made changes to prepare for the new educational standards. This webinar will explore key Common Core assessments and what they mean for assistive technology infrastructure and service delivery. Your presenter today is Ruth Zokowski, President of Don Johnston Incorporated. Ruth, thank you so much for presenting on this important topic today.
Hi everyone. I see a lot of people that I know, so it's great to virtually see you all. I think we're going to start today with a poll. I really like getting feedback from people, and so this will just give us an idea, and we'll let you know kind of a little bit about who's in our audience today. So we're going to go ahead and launch a poll. It's just another way we can interact with you. So go ahead and answer your questions.
Okay, so the poll is in progress. Go ahead and answer your questions. Select one or more of the following. PARCC is a beautiful place with trees and flowers. Smarter Balanced is a healthy choice for butter. NCSC is the National Championship for Scholarly Children. TEKS is technology everyone kinda shares, or none of the above. And you can select multiple answers. So go ahead and answer, click your answers for the poll. There we go. Okay, we've got about 75% of you have already answered the poll, so we'll just give you another maybe 15 seconds. Okay.
Hopefully you all see our little bit of humor in this. So it's a good way to let the laggards get on board too. So we've got a couple of people joining, but we can probably close the poll and
close it? Okay.
Yeah,
and we'll share the results. Okay.
So as you see, there's the majority of you know that those are just kind of all made up. The field of special education is packed with lots of different acronyms. So hopefully at the end you'll know that Parkwell, P-A-R-K, is a beautiful place with trees and flowers. That P-A-R-C-C, that part means something different. And Smarter Balance, we always think it's butter, but there is a statewide assessment coming with that as well. So anyway, so we'll get started. My role as president is to look ahead, look at new. I got to share my screen, I guess. Okay. Hold on one second. Logistically, we're going to get that. Come on, screen sharing. Did you close the poll?
Yes. The poll is
there.
Closed. There we go.
Okay. Maybe you're still not seeing my screen. Hold on, one technical problem, everyone.
That's what it's.
All right, those darn polls, they just get in the way. So anyway, my role as president is to really kind of look forward, understand a lot of the trends that are happening, and then figure out what that means to this field and this industry and to our company. So I've been really following and been very active in terms of a lot of the new assessments that are coming. The one thing we know, there's a lot of uncertainty in the world right now, but one thing we know in education is that accountability is kind of here to stay. And the way right now we measure accountability is through a lot of formative and standardized summative tests. And so, I really have been digging in to try to understand. I've also been doing a lot of advocacy as well because I think this is a really important area. So So anyway, today I'm going to share what I know and hopefully just what's most important, give you resources, because I think everyone needs to be well versed in this, and obviously you're here because you obviously understand that need. So my goal today is to give you an overview of the new assessment and accommodations and really start getting you to think about what are the implications to your AT team or to your special education department. So, you know, I've been using this graphic for a while because I think in the area of special education, we know that with the Common Core standards, we know that a lot of other changes that are going around, that with our students, to keep them at grade level performance, it's really the goal is to keep our students in the general ed curriculum and meeting grade level performance. That usually, you know, we start with some intervention, and then what we find is we need to also add assistive technology and services. And there's lots of ways to doing this, either through universal design for learning or through more traditional approaches. But we know that the role of assistive technology is one that gets students to grade level performance. And if we're going to talk about assessment, we know that assistive technology is part of that as well. So in the world, we've been, everyone constantly looks at their standards, and probably in the last couple of years, a lot of changes have been made to standards. A lot of people talk about college and career readiness, that the goal ultimately is that our students are ready for college and that they're ready for their careers. Many states have worked together to develop what's called the Common Core. I think there's still about 5 states that have not adopted the Common Core, but they still have their college and career readiness standards. And, you know, when you really dig in deep, they all look fairly aligned. So I'll be mentioning more of the Common Core today, but please keep in mind that does not leave anyone out, because if you're not from one of the Common Core states, your state does have college and career readiness. And then the goal with the standards was to have some type of assessment, and the world's moving towards, you know, has always had summative assessments. We're also adding more formative assessments throughout the year. But the goal of the assessment is really supposed to be a feedback loop, and to let us know how we're doing in terms of meeting these standards, and ultimately how we're doing in terms of making sure our students are college and career ready. One thing that's happened in this age of accountability is if you put that over the layer, that layer over this has not only been a formative or a feedback loop, it's starting to be used in terms of accountability not only for teachers and their teacher evaluations. Traditionally, most states, as they're looking at new teacher evaluations, are using some of these assessments as part of it, but also for students. You know, we see that students can't exit grades or that type of thing based on some of these tests. So, and I have a personal story. This topic, you know, as I got into this topic, one day was sitting at home and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is, you know, it's interesting how this kind of circle of life kind of happens to you. And I think about my husband, who, while he was in college, he really wanted to be a special education teacher. And, you know, here I was, you know, a student as an OT, and I knew he was struggling with his standardized test, but I didn't know about accommodations. I really wasn't thinking about that. So he had somebody very close to him that could have, you know, really started thinking about this, but neither of us did. And he really had to switch careers because he just could not pass this one standardized test. And that really was a difference that one test could make. So while, you know, there's a part of me that every day I'm fighting for accommodations for students, I also sometimes wonder if this is really the best way to assess, you know, if somebody's really ready for that career. So anyway, we also, like I said, in terms of high stakes, I can tell you that this is a great chart I found for Center on Educational Policy, and this shows the states in the red, students actually have to pass exit exams. And so again, you can see that the majority of our states are red or gray in here, and so that tells me that a lot of these standardized types of assessments are being used in a high-stakes way. And so that increases the need to make sure that students have the access that they deserve, you know, through IDEA or even as through the ADA. So we started out the webinar with a lot of these really interesting acronyms, and I tried to lay them out here for you. So there's many new acronyms, and these represent the summative tests. that a lot of states are adopting. Now, not every state will do that. So, for example, the general assessment is what 99% of the students will be taking. And there's two big consortiums. There's PARCC and Smarter Balance. But your state might not have adopted this and might have their own. So, for example, Texas has their TEKS exam, or their tax, one of the T words. And so they haven't adopted either of them. But these assessments came out of a large Race to the Top federal government grant to and try to get two consortiums so we could get a little bit of competition and give states some choice, but to really represent an assessment that would mirror what we're trying to accomplish in the college and career readiness standards. After that RFP was out, I think everyone was like, oops, not everyone, but I think there was a little bit like, oops, we forgot about that alternate assessment, that 1% group. And so then quickly there are two new grants posted, and that was for the dynamic learning map. Sometimes you'll hear that called DLM, or the NISIC or NCSE National Center and State Collaborative. Those are going to be the two alternate assessments. And then there's actually some ELL assessments, which I put out there, but I'm not going to really cover today. I just want to make you aware of that. And when we get to talk about accommodations, that it does apply to English language learners as well. So if that's an issue for you, I highly recommend that you look into that as well. So the best thing I can do is to help you find your profile. So I always think about like the Myers-Briggs, you're either an E or an I, you're an introvert or an extrovert. So I'm going to help you find your profile because each state is a little different. Now I did this, prepared this webinar probably about a month or so ago, and I can tell you already that there's a change. So let's go ahead and find your profile, and if you want, so S would stand for, so I want you to look across. So if you're Alaska, you're going to look across and you're going to say your general assessment is S, that would be Smarter Balance, and your alternate assessment is the D, which would be the DLM, and then you're in that assets one with the ELL. So an Alaska person would be an SDA. Somebody like, let's find Texas, where's Texas? They're a nothing because they need to really look at their state assessment. And again, just so you know, I'm telling you this information is about a month old, and I can tell you that the state of Florida, while it says P here for PARCC, just recently dropped out. So we do expect a lot of shifting back and forth between this, and so ultimately you'll want to just look at your state page to understand which consortium you're in or you're not in. So hopefully that makes sense. So if people want to maybe send me your little profile, if you're an SDA or a PNA or a PA, so that will just help you understand which one you are. And again, going back, the P standard for PARCC, the S standard for Smarter Balance, D standard for Dynamic Learning Map, N for NCSE, A for Assets, and E for ALPA. All right? So that should help you understand where you're going, and we're going to show you how some of the accommodations are similar and different between these. Another big shift that's been happening over the last couple of years is that there's been this kind of extra 2%, or some people called it the modified assessment. And over the last couple of years, as states have gone for their No Child Left Behind waiver so that they didn't have to ensure that every student would be reading by grade 3, one of the things they had to do is start agreeing to get rid of these modified assessments. And there's some new legislation and language coming out that would propose that all these are going to be gone by the 2014-15 year. So the issue is, it was just since 2010-11, over 400,000 students with disabilities were taking the modified exam. And what we found is that there was this 2% rule, but many states were well above that. Oklahoma had 52% on that in the reading and 49% in the math. Tennessee, Texas, California, and Connecticut. So what we're finding is that, we have this high stakes, what was probably supposed to be like a 97% of the students, and then you had a 2% for a modified and a 1% for alternate. People and that 2% were really taking advantage of that. And, obviously that's our lack of confidence that these students can get to grade level. So, knowing that, and I'm not sure if your state's included, I'd like to do another poll and see what kind of impact you think will have on your students that this removal of the modified exam. And you can have multiple answers on that. So we've launched the poll. Go ahead and tell us what you think the impact would be. It's funny, this is the third time doing this webinar. We've had different changes on this, different answers for the different groups. So. All right, we got about half of you voting, so give us the rest. And we'll close the poll in another, let's say 5 seconds. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we'll show you the results. So with this group, 71% felt that that would increase the need for assistive technology. 71% also thought it would increase the need for more test prep. The next was RTI, and then 30% said that they would move their student to alternate assessment. Now keep in mind with that, you still have a 1% cap. So while I think a lot of people are going to try to do that, maybe fill up their 1%, they won't be able to do that. That's similar. I would say one of the webinars, the test prep was, really, really high, and another webinar, the AT, was the highest. So, so I think that's very similar to what we're seeing in some of the other. So I think that's just going to be another, if you're in one of those states with an alternate assessment, you probably need to, be paying attention to that. I mean, with that modified. And I think, again, it's an opportunity to talk about the impact for assistive technology, because our goal is to get students to grade level standards. So, so when it comes to testing and accommodations, I'm going to give you a summary of this general assessment, which would be the PARCC and the Smarter Balance. And so there's some similarities, but there's also some differences. So this is kind of a model that I think we could look at in terms of understanding how they're thinking about accommodation. So there's some good news. And first is that there's, when these RFPs went out, there was one of the requirements was that they would be universally designed. And so it did get people thinking broader about what were some universally accessible tools. And I'll give you examples of that. But these tests were, tried to be thinking about a wide variety of students, not only just from how the test was created, but even from the item types. They were thinking about cultural diversity in terms of the language they use, that type of thing. There's a new layer that's been introduced, and that's called, one of the assessments calls it a personal needs profile. The other one doesn't, but I've seen that kind of term used. And I think a lot of people have always said every student should have an IEP. So I think the goal with that is to say, hey, we know other students could benefit from some of these accommodations, so let's make them available. And then the last layer is your individualized accommodations, which are kind of typical what we knew about in past assessments. So when we think about these universally accessible tools, we're talking about all students. When we think about this middle layer, it's also all students, but the trick here is that there's certain things that need to be determined prior to the test. And some of those accommodations, if you want them available, there has to be a determination prior, and they have to be turned on. And then when we get to individualized accommodations, those are only for students with IEP 504 and ELL. So again, I think the good news is that some of these things that we're seeing as special, possibly unfair advantages for students with disabilities are now going to be available to all students. So let's look at the two assessments and give you some examples, and I'll give you more of their specific terminology. So on the left, I have the PARCC accommodations, and the right, I have Smarter Balance. I'm going to go from the bottom up because, again, kind of using that triangle. So PARCC calls theirs accessibility for all, and Smarter Balance calls it universal tools. And you can see they have a lot of the same tools. So the ability to eliminate answers, or audio amplification, or highlighting tools. Those are tools that are just going to be available to all students. Then we have this kind of middle layer. Remember, this is that layer that these are things that can be turned on if it's determined prior. So both PARCC calls it a personal needs profile, and Smarter Balance calls it a designated support. You can see things like answer masking is in there, background font color, Smarter Balance has translated tests, and Park has a line reader tool. So I show you that just to show, like, while there's a lot of parallels, there are some unique differences. And then when we get to accommodations, again, this is our typical things like Braille, closed captioning. In Park, you'll see that it right now includes word prediction and speech to text. Smarter Balance only discusses speech to text, which if you're in a Smarter Balance state, let me know, because we still need a lot of advocacy. I think they're missing the boat that more students actually use word prediction than speech to text. So they need to start addressing that. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the differences. Now I wanted to actually explicitly talk about text-to-speech because that's one of the big hairy things. And interestingly, what we found in these tests is these tests are made of consortiums of states, and they all have to come to some kind of consensus. And this is such a hot topic for states that this is one of these areas that they cannot get consensus on. And so I know in the Park, they did approve their accommodations manual, but one state didn't agree. So it shows how, you know, to me it kind of blows my mind away, because these things, it's pretty, it's not a big issue, but it is obviously a big issue for a lot of people. So when we talk about text-to-speech, again, on the Park, and Smarter Balance, what you'll see is if you identify that a student can benefit from text-to-speech, they can get it on their math exam. So again, that means that any student, it doesn't have to be a student with an IEP, can get text-to-speech support for that math assessment piece. But again, that needs to be determined prior, and we'll talk more about what that means. When it comes to the English language arts, you can see the differences here between the two consortiums. So on Park, they allow it on the English language arts, but you need a documentation in your diagnostic assessment, and you must use instruction and still receive intervention. So I think the biggest fear is they didn't want us to be compensating for these students and students not getting their intervention. And then there's a confidential notation saying that no claims can be made on reading skills. So that's kind of how they do it. They're saying, okay, if you're going to do this, we'll include you, but we're not going to make a claim on your reading skills. Now, Smarter Balance took a little different approach. They will not allow a read aloud for the English language arts exam until you're starting at a 6th grade. And what they say then is that they'll run reports to indicate the percentage of students who had access to text-to-speech, and obviously you need headphones. So what they're saying is basically they'll be monitoring you if you are using that. I think in both cases you're kind of being monitored because there'll be some kind of notation. And so I think the implication of that is that you need to have really good justification of why you're making these decisions. There's also this kind of feeling out there that it's, you know, they just will randomly throw out that, you know, this should be about 1% to 2% of the students. And I think most of us who work with a lot of these students think that could be higher. But there's really no data on that. You know, I keep asking people, how do they come up with the 1% to 2%, and I can't get an answer on that. So I think, you know, if you are going over that 1% to 2%, you'll definitely want some good data to justify that, because you might have somebody knocking at your door to ask you how you came up with that. But I think if we have good data, too, we can also help support our decisions and showing and educating people that there are more students that could benefit and do higher level, grade level material, you know, work with that. So some of the things that I see that have been just in general happening with these assessments is a couple things that you need to be aware of. So the first is what I think is a misperception of UDL. These assessments started out with a kind of a, if we just have UDL, we don't really need AT. And so they put all their energy into Universal Design for Learning, and I can tell you that the AT side, you know, ATIA as a Manufacturers Association has never been contacted formally up until just recently. We did reach out and, you know, got some really vague responses. But they're kind of at the back end saying, oh, you know, we need to have AT. And, you know, my definition of UDL is really, you know, it should be like the three-prong plug that any AT can fit in. And one of the reasons why just a purely universally designed assessment doesn't work when it comes to assessment is there's always been a belief that students should be using the tools all along in their daily instruction, and it shouldn't be new at the test. Well, if you have a brand new file format, testing format with accommodations that you don't get to use all the time, it just goes counter to what we're trying to do. It also kind of, in the early days when we talked about even text-to-speech, it's like, well, why can't the kids use the text-to-speech they're using every day? The answer was, well, they can test, with our assessment tool, and they can practice with that. Well, that's not a good use of instructional time, just to practice with the tool to be able to perform on a test. And there's actually case law of a law student who, was told they had to use the built-in accommodations, and she said, no, I want to use my accommodations that I'm comfortable with. And she actually won. So I think once that kind of people started seeing some of the case law, they quickly scrambled to say, oh, I get why kids need to use their AT, but we're still running behind the 8 ball on this one, and again, we need a lot of advocacy. We're always dealing with the concept of fairness, so, a lot of, I love this quote, restrictions on testing and accommodations are simply veiled discrimination masquerading as fairness. They're trying to be very data-driven, but, I can tell you that in the early days they said word prediction has there's no indication that it provides an unfair accommodation, but yet they are putting a lot of restrictions on that. So again, we need to keep asking for where's your research, where's your data to support limiting these to students. And finally, we're running into security as one of the biggest issues, so they really want everything locked down, and as we know, AT usually sits on top of tools, and so they are literally locking out even some of the built-in system supports just to get good security, so we're going to have to keep fighting with that. So those are some of the things that I'm actually advocating for. So I love this graphic, and this kind of probably shows my underlying feelings about assessment, and fairness, because sometimes in our attempt to be fair, we kind of look a little bit silly, and some of our questions are actually really wrong. So anyway, let me go back to critical considerations for AT. So if you have this kind of universal...
Excuse me,
yep.
Can you go back 2 slides and then come forward, because for some reason it's on the, I'm seeing the text to speech. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's open this here.
Technical problems. Hold on, everyone.
And just make sure.
Let me stop showing my screen and reshow
and then
it.
Reshow it. Yeah, refresh it. Maybe
and while we're waiting, we're seeing some people say that RTI is really growing, and they're talking a lot about AT with RTI. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Really excited to hear that.
Okay, let's see if you go forward, if that works now.
Let's see. No, you guys are stuck. You can't see my cute little...
Maybe turn your screen off here, and then turn it back on again. Okay.
We should refresh on yours.
Let's ask the attendees what screen they're seeing.
Some have no visual.
Raise your hand if you're still seeing the screen that says text to speech on the top of it.
Oh, somebody could see the cartoon. Some see only the title page. Some see the cartoon. It could be you. Okay, a lot of people are seeing the cartoon. Okay, thanks for your help.
All right, thank you.
We'll just keep going. It's just scary. So anyway, when you think about these different types of accessibility, with this middle layer of all students, needing some type of predetermination if they could benefit, let's say, for text-to-speech on the map, you're going to need a more efficient process to identify that. Again, I don't know, most people don't understand even what text-to-speech is other than people with assistive technology. So I see this as an opportunity where AT needs to be able to educate general educators and help them make that decision. Not only education, but also come up with a process. So our recommendation is that you need some type of consistent process, because all the research shows that just education doesn't work. A lot of the work by Dr. Denise DeCose, if you read the the research summary in PAR tell you that a lot of decisions about accommodations are made just based on the availability of an accommodation. But we really want a good process where we're giving that to students who we know need it. So I would think about, a more consistent process, and again, doing that more universally. And then, so I think, that's where we're starting to see, really seeing some exciting work out of districts where they're taking students who are reading below grade level, whether they're on IEPs or not, and if they meet a certain criteria, then they look at all those students with PAR. And then we get a good idea about students who could benefit from a read aloud accommodations. And then third, I think you need to think really about your students with special needs. If they're using a certain type of AT on the in daily instruction, can they make that, if it's speech, if it's text-to-speech, can they generalize that to another speech synthesizer that might be going a little bit slower, it might be a different voice. The one consortium I'm hearing is using the system voices. The other one hasn't been able to tell me that. So hopefully the voices could be the same, but again, they might not have the same control. So it's just something for you to think about in your assessments, that you're thinking about not only the daily instructional tasks, but the assessment at the end of the year. And so here's kind of what I would propose as actions. One is create that assessment process to determine some of these accommodations that expand beyond assistive technology, that are simple and easy, that lots of people can replicate. And again, that was why Denise DeCoste did that PAR, is that she didn't want it to be just her AT team. And so she sees she trains lots of people in the district to be able to use that. Think about creating an environment that's universally designed with these core HT tools available everywhere. So we know there's certain types of assistive technology, especially text-to-speech, word prediction, that lots of students could benefit from. So if they're available everywhere, the students are going to have more access to them. They're going to use them more daily. And then you'll have a better feeling for, are they ready to use it on their state test. We always need great instruction. We know that AT does not solve all these issues, so we really need great instruction. We need to keep inclusion going, and one of the biggest tools for inclusion is co-teaching, and I think we really need to start looking at our co-teachers as the leaders of integrating technology into the classroom, because, again, they probably have the best opportunity to do the instructional scaffolding and understand the students who could benefit, and present it in a way for all students to benefit. So again, just another way to look at it is, I think you need some good assessment tools, and I would recommend PAR, and on the writing side I would recommend Denise's written productivity profile. I think you need those core genres of AT available. You need your text reader, word prediction, writing organization, word processor, and I would add speech to text to that, obviously. And then you still need great instruction and intervention. So we think writing is going to be a big hot topic, and so we really see that solo writing coach is going to be one of those really important interventions. If you have a student who cannot fluently write a paragraph without putting all their energy into just constructing a paragraph, they're going to really struggle on this assessment, and you'll see that coming up. Even if they struggle to put a sentence together, it's going to be really hard. So we need to give them lots of practice in making sentences and making paragraphs for them to have a shot at doing well on this assessment. So I'm going to take a break for a minute from my PowerPoint, and we're going to, while I'm switching over, if there's any questions, go ahead and send those in. I'm going to just give you an example so you can start to see what some of these assessments look like, because a lot of people haven't even seen what an assessment looks like. So let's take a peek. So the first one is Smarter Balance. This is, I think, either 3rd or 4th grade. And you can see in this assessment, you can say I'm going to have to read, and then I'm going to answer a question, and I have to do writing. So some of them have multiple choice questions, and some of them, have a lot of reading. So here I read a part of the text again, and I select 3 sentences that shows my evidence of why Naomi is worried. Or here I read the sentence, and I click on 2 phrases from the paragraph that helps me understand the meaning of the word scared. So that's what a Smarter Balance assessment looks like. And I'll show you how we can work on some of that within some of our AT tools. And then when it comes to Park, Park doesn't have their samples, but they show you kind of the sample items. So again, this is 4th grade, and you can see where they read a passage, and in that they have to look at the meaning of the word. They ask what the meaning of the word avenge is, and then they ask, which detail from the story best supports that. So there's 4 sentences, and again, they're really looking a lot for this evidence. So if we go back over to Read Out Loud and we want to look at what this looks like, I kind of created, and I really think what we call our supported reading guide could be a really important piece. We know text-to-speech is going to be a big support, and so obviously they can just click and start reading it aloud. I'm not going to read it aloud because you guys get the idea. But you can look at these assessments and look at our instruction and how we can use a tool that's a text reader, but also start showing them how they can accomplish their Common Core goals. So here's the question, what is the meaning of the word avenge? I can come in here and find the word avenge. And there's the word. I can read that sentence aloud to me.
Chief or no chief, said Cricket bravely, I have a cousin who is mightier than you, and he will avenge me.
Okay, so now I have to decide, does it mean believe, make friends with, scared, or get even? And again, I can just, drag my right answer, or again, I can print it off. And then I have to find which detail from the story best supports this. So again, I have to find these different parts of the story and choose which one. So if I can't read that aloud, I can still have that read to me. I can find it in the text a little bit faster and then choose the one that best supports it. All right, so that's one example. Another example was that Grandma Ruth. Can you believe that they're asking about me already? Anyway, no, just kidding. So one of the so you can see that those students need to write a paragraph afterwards, and they need to cite their evidence. And so another way we can show and get students ready for that, and I found this Winn-Dixie Common Core. If you just look up Common Core instructional examples, you can find stuff like this. So I found one on Winn-Dixie. And again, the goal would be to have the student read this, but then again have some of these questions. So why was Miss Franny so scared by Winn-Dixie? Why is she acting all embarrassed? A strategy that I know my daughter's using is the ICE strategy, ICE, so introduce, cite, and explain. So I started to introduce, Miss Franny was scared when she looked at the window to see a large dog. If I want to cite something, I can look through that text and find something to cite. Let's see, I haven't read this for a while, so we'll find something in here. Miss Franny sat there trembling and shaking. So maybe that's what I want to use to cite my evidence. And then I can do my summary. And now I can easily, from doing this work, we're breaking down the task for the student, we can come over here into Write Out Loud.
To write out loud.
And, oops, I'm not sure why that just did that. We'll go back. It didn't like something. But I could easily go ahead and write about that. Another thing I can do is you can see they really want these students writing with large vocabulary, so we need to be able to write the word library and trembling and that type of thing. So I don't know if any of you have seen the new Co-Writer, but I'm going to open up Co-Writer for a moment. And there's a couple things we can do. We could make a quick topic on the topic of Winn-Dixie. Okay, and so that's one way we can do it. I'm going to show you another really cool way. Because we know that students need to be able to have access to what they read in terms of that vocabulary in their writing. So I can come in here and copy this text. I'm not going to spend time to get all of it, but I'm going to copy it. And now I'm going to come over to Co-Writer and make a quick topic. And right now it's taking all those words that I'm reading, and now those words are accessible to me in terms of my writing. So you can see my word bank. Let's do a list of all the words on there. So I have Herman W., I have library, I have Memorial Library, Miss Franny Block, embarrass, experience. So it just really makes available to me the words that I'm going to need to be able to talk about. So how did the Herman Block Memorial come to get its name? So you can see if I start, the Herman, and there it is, W. Block, and library, if I spell, and you can see with just L-I-B, there it is, got its name. So you can see how those words are just so super available to me, and it's really going to help me focus on, actually creating my answers instead of making spelling be one of the barriers. So that's just two examples of the PARCC and the Smarter Balance. Most of them, keep in mind, the reason why I want you to understand which consortium you're in, there's a wealth of materials on each website, so I would definitely look at that. And they both have their accommodations manuals published as well, so I would highly encourage you to look at that. And then ultimately, I want you to make sure that you spend time on your state website, because as things shift and change, you need to know that each state will probably move over time. So your state's going to have the most up-to-date. Here's information on the Common Core. Again, here's PARCC and Smarter Balance. I really didn't talk much about the DLM and the NISIC, the alternate, the 1%. It's probably another webinar, but I'll be around. So if you have any specific questions, I can do my best job answering that. I love, this is a summary I found from K12center.org that has a summary of all the different assessments. That's really important. So just with that, we're going to close and do a poll and ask some questions, but I'll tell you my last story. So I don't know if you know about the eagle, but as the eagle soars, the way its wings work, that it takes just as much energy to soar through the sky as for an eagle to sit on a fence. And so what we really want is to make sure that our students have the tools that really help them soar, that they can show what they know, that they have a good, fair assessment of their skills. And so I hope that, as students use some of these tools and get comfortable and use them daily in instruction when it comes to the assessment, if we do things right, they should be able to soar and not use any additional energy. So with that, we can answer questions, and I think we have one final poll. So Karen will post that.
And I wonder if people can see it, because my screen did not advance.
So we'll look for people's answers on that,
Okay.
Karen.
And if
And
they
I
can't,
lost my
I can
question
just run it
panel.
from your thing.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Are people?
Oh, yeah,
There's progress. Yeah.
there's progress. Okay.
Good. Good.
See, I'm not receiving anything over here for some reason.
But this was the last poll.
Okay.
Let's
All
go.
right,
Let's go to this poll.
It's not communicating. Yeah, do launch.
And launch it. So this poll will ask us, how are things, based on this information, how much change do you think this will? So give us a little bit more data. And again, we're here for questions. Let's chat. Oh. Okay, so we've got more than half of you voting. It's always interesting to see the impact. And I hope you have a question or two, if nothing else, on alternate assessment. So the questions you can use in the chat window or the question box. And we'll close the poll and share that in just a minute. So we'll give you 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We'll close the poll and then we'll share it so you can see the answers. So what we're finding is that 38% really feel like this is going to make you rethink everything. The other half says it will really facilitate some major changes in what you do in your policies and procedures. 25% say a little bit, and 0 say everything will stay the same. So nothing ever stays the same, right? So I'm going to go ahead and hide that poll. And that's kind of consistent. We've seen, you know, several people feel like this is a significant change, or, you know, that's going to really rethink everything. You know, I just think the issue of, you know, we're going to potentially be able to test every student in the school for math, text to speech is really interesting. So, what do you see going on with the personal needs profile? Are there any formal information out there on the website to check? So, what I would suggest you do on that, Helen, is go to either PARCC or Smarter Balance. So, look at what your state is and look for the accommodations manual. And then go through that. Now you'll see the 3 layers, and you'll see the specific accommodations that they're talking about for each of those 3 layers. So hopefully that will help you. You know, I think it's a great idea about that. I just worry about, you know, like I said, we know that not even every student's getting assessed for assistive technology. So how the heck do we think this is going to happen for all these students? And we know that without good policies and procedures, people just do these random checklists. So one of my examples is I had a staff who asked me to look at her son's IEP. And, you know, you're reading and it says, you know, student doesn't do well with auditory only commands. And one of the accommodations was a read aloud, you know, was auditory, everything auditorily. And I'm like, you know, part of the reason why they chose that, it was just the laundry list, right? So they just picked anything and put it on the students' IEPs. And so I think we have to create processes that are going to be more specific. So am I implying that read out loud might be used on Common Core assessments for kids using an everyday assessment? Well, I think personally I would love to see that. I think with security issues, I think on this first round, I think a lot of AT is going to be blocked, honestly. They really have not been proactive enough to get some of this stuff worked out. So do I think long-term that's the best solution? Yeah, I think if I'm a student, you know, the example I give of myself, there was a brand new version of Microsoft Word, put it on my machine, and I could not save or print that day because instead of being under the file menu, it was a graphic icon, and I could not find it. So, you know, if we want our students to have the best outcome, they should be using the tools they're using every day. You know, we shouldn't be introducing anything new, which is interesting because that's what we've always said in accommodations, and that's always been a rule, but because we kind of got confused about what universal design for learning looks like, we thought we could just pop a new tool with new supports in it and think students are going to give us their best performance. So that's been part of what the AT industry has been fighting for, is that, you know, really what universal design for assessments looks like is letting them use the AT they use every day. Got lots of I knows and I agrees. There's a question. I was called out to school to help a teacher, so I wasn't able to hear the entire webinar. Yes, we'll email the slides. Of course, we will do that. So, and we'll give you a recording as well. So that's probably the best way. By the end of the week, maybe you can zoom ahead so you don't have to re-listen to me twice. God forbid. I wouldn't want to listen to me more than once. Let's see. I think we'll be lucky just to get the correct accommodations for our IEP kids. I totally agree, and I think that's where we need to start because they really, honestly need them the most. So. And yes, I think it's going to be a slow process. You can see there's even lots of, you know, there's lots of evidence that in some of the test cases, some of the places where they've tried this, the students with disabilities are not getting fair representation even in some of the tests. So there's a lot of issues. I feel sorry for these test developers, honestly. I don't know. It's not a nut I would want to crack. You've got lots of stakeholders and lots of places that are just hard. So, but we're really, I as a company am advocating, to create the dialogue and, create a dialogue about how can we accommodate your security needs, but also allow kids the AT they need every day. And my analogy is, banks figured out credit cards and all that, so we should be able to figure this out. It's a doable task, so we shouldn't just use security as a crutch to say we can't allow AT. We just need to have the right dialogue. So, I would say for all of you guys, keep advocating to your state. Let them know that you want your kids to use the AT they're using every day. Let your states know that they can't leave tools out just because they don't understand them. I feel like Smarter Balance doesn't understand that there's more kids using word prediction than speech to text. I was just at Closing the Gap, and I've been asking people, and one district said 500 to 3. They have 500 kids on word prediction to 3 on speech to text. So to totally just not even acknowledge it, to me, is really a lack of understanding of some of the ATs. So we've got to keep advocating as a field for our kiddos. So let's see, any other questions? Just lots of thank yous.
Questions.
Yeah, thanks for sending in questions. It's a great dialogue, and a virtual dialogue. This is really a dialogue when I talk at you.
Yeah,
So, again, I think you're here because you care and you're proactive enough to start to understand this topic.
Mm-hmm.
So I think kudos to you, and your school districts and your students will benefit just because you're here. Keep learning. We'll try to keep you up to date. Like I said, the one thing I know about this topic, it will definitely change, so keep watching your state website. But, this is our last webinar, but we'll probably do it again come December, January with an update, because I think it is kind of a moving target and we need to keep educating people. So stay in touch. I would highly recommend, we also have Darren Avey from Texas, and he has a great story to tell, because just allowing some of these accommodations on the test has totally changed his district and how they're thinking about assistive technology, and so and they're using it to facilitate universal design for learning. So I think he has a really great story to tell, real systematic implementation with assessment. So I think there's a, if you want to continue to learn about that, I would highly recommend. He's speaking Wednesday, October 23rd at 1 o'clock, or Tuesday, November 12th at 1 o'clock. Those are both Central Standard Time. Or just go to our website. Everything's there, and you can sign up there. So.
Mm-hmm. And if you go to the website, you can click on the tab that says webinars, and then you can scroll down the webinars to find his and register right there.
So
Sorry.
I think with that, we'll stick around for a little bit more if there's any additional questions, but being respectful of your time, you get an 8-minute break to go to the bathroom or eat a lunch, which most of you probably don't have time to do ever. So thanks again.
Also, just a couple quick announcements. I did say this at the beginning, and a couple of you may have missed it, but you will receive the follow-up email with the webinar recording along with the slides that Ruth had mentioned. So you'll get both of those together. Also, continue to let us know what topics you're interested in so we can continue to provide you with webinars that you like. And also feel free to email Ruth or myself with other questions. And her email address is on that last slide. So when you get that, you can feel free to, she's very knowledgeable and also loves to help people. So I also encourage you to visit our website for more helpful resources. The website is full of just great information and resources and things that can help you out in your job. And those are all the announcements that I have. So if we don't have any more questions, it looks like we've answered all of our questions that we have. Do you have anything else that you'd like to say, Ruth?
No, but thanks for coming, and if I haven't met you before, I hope someday I get to be able to meet you, and hello to all the people that we have met. So keep doing the great work you do. So
Okay.
all right, thanks everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.